you know how so many cafes these days have a similar gray, minimal design? Kind of like this, this, this. Not so much like the unique, colorful ones in old sitcoms. Kind of like this, or this. There was an article recently by Inc. that really stood out to me, and it was about how the world is losing color, literally. According to recent AI research, 2 centuries ago, black, white, and gray tones made up just 15% of all items. Today, it's 60%. The world is losing color and originality as we speak, but here we are, desaturizing and repackaging the same things, same trends. Trends like model off duty turned that girl, turned clean girl, turned vanilla girl, which ironically I think is just wearing white. And if you don't know what any of that means, congratulations. But if you do, you know that we're taking this and rewarding it with virality. Never mind that none of it really feels original. It's good branding, and good branding equals success. It's a pretty simple formula. Even professionally, you want that job or internship in marketing? Let's see your personal socials. See if you can brand yourself well. Doctors are doing trendy TikTok dances, sharing medical facts to brand themselves. So I do love the duality. We're being told left and right to brand and define ourselves, to be extraordinary, useful, known for something that sets us apart from the rest, but to package it neatly and cohesively into this grayscale box. But we're being told to hyperfixate on who we are instead of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I'm not saying to not have a resume or a portfolio, but what I am saying is that in this digital era, it feels like everyone needs a personal brand. It's become this trap to reduce our personhood to a commodity and a nice marketable package. But in this, what space does this leave for us for our creativity, for our community, for our evolution? And today, I want to break down a little bit of why we should be critical of this, because we're not brands, we're people. And again, anti-evolution, I want to break down why attaching our identities and our livelihoods to these labels, this oversimplification of self, is anti-evolution, anti-creativity, and anti-community. I'll start with a personal story. It's 2015, and I've just filmed my first YouTube video on my MacBook Air webcam. And I have no idea how to edit, so I just upload the entire clip online. And it's awful, but I'm proud of it nonetheless. And a few months later, I was sitting in my English class when I hit 100 subscribers. And I'll never forget how excited I was that I was just sharing personal stories, like how lonely I felt in college, and things I was enjoying, like beauty, fashion, books I was reading, and 100 people were connecting to it. I was essentially just documenting my growth and sharing my self-discovery, and I loved it. And the videos were slowly getting better. But none of that would have been possible had I thought of myself as a brand with a distinct identity not to be deviated from. I was just going off vibes. And it worked, because a few months later, LA called. Suddenly now, I'm in this room in Hollywood being told that I need a personal brand and that it needs to be as pretty and cohesive as my Instagram, which desperately needs to be cleaned up because people need to know everything you're about based off the first 6 photos they see. I'm being told that I need to pick a lane because my love for sharing wasn't going to cut it anymore. In fact, I was told that if I didn't pick a lane and build off that brand, that I would never be able to do any of it well or at full potential. But that was the point. I never claimed to be an expert or that good at anything. In fact, I was pretty bad or a beginner at a lot of things and just documenting the growth. And I didn't trust myself to not want to change my mind about what I wanted. And I felt like focusing on just one part that I had decided then and there meant killing the other parts. And the literal definition of evolution is to go from simple to more complex, not the other way around. But now I was being told that I needed a personal brand and that it needed to be as pretty and cohesive as it needed to be, and otherwise my career would have been over as quickly as it began. If you think about it, personal brand is just another term for reputation, except for it comes with this expectation that you will internalize that brand, that reputation, and maneuver within its confines, which is suffocating. Because if there's no space to deviate, like if we change our minds about something we've spoken publicly about, or make a wrong decision, change our pace, there's also no space to evolve. Which is why viewing ourselves as people, as brands, that suffer from our missteps and our changes, and not people who are changing. It's anti-evolution. Now, there's infinite ways to measure our self-evolution, but one way is in our personal successes. The decisions we make that move our stories forward, not our brands. They're the wins that contribute to our self-esteem and allow us to trust and believe our voices, that allow us to remain aligned with our intuition and intentions as they change. And I often think of Toni Morrison's response when she was asked about success. She said, and I quote, "For me, success is not a public thing. It's a private thing. I have fewer and fewer regrets." Think of Simone Biles, who seemed top of her game when she suddenly withdrew from the Tokyo Olympics because her mind and body weren't in sync. Or Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who stepped down because she needed to prioritize the other parts of her life. These women were acting as people, not caricatures of themselves or as brands. And I can't speak for them, but their ability to move their stories by honoring their voices feels a lot like personal success. And my favorite part about this measure is something fundamentally impossible for a brand, and it's that it exists outside of time. Meaning the value of your voice and your story never expires. It's never too late. Because even if it takes time to recognize, the moment you honor your voice, you unlock a personal success, and your evolution continues. And even if our peers or the media are moving 1,000,000 miles an hour, we can never fall behind in our own stories because they don't move without us. And it's important to note that your voice isn't something you create or manufacture. Your voice is something you already possess, something you discover, rediscover, become aware of. And where you find your voice, you also find your creativity. But to lose your voice, you lose your creativity. Now, creativity and our voices go hand in hand. They're a team. And like our stories, they'll never abandon us entirely because they belong to us. But the longer we abandon them or compromise them for external validation, maybe the chance of going viral, we risk co-opting those external voices and taking them on as our own, which is really scary. And I know somewhere along my path of not picking one, I did this. Any creativity and so much of what I once enjoyed was now tainted because I couldn't recognize my voice. I was so scared I'd started taking on these external voices until one day I'd slowly taken on the voice of my biggest critic. And suddenly any creativity was now blocked and replaced with shameful thoughts. But shame is the opposite of creativity because you begin to see everything you do as inadequate or embarrassing. and it was crippling. So even right now, I just lost my thought. Pretty embarrassing and crippling, but you know. The worst part was that I had no idea when the external barriers between me and my creativity became internal. And the further I felt from my voice and my ability to move my story, the more I wanted to isolate myself. And I knew that was the last thing I needed to do. And it's safe to say that the personal brand is largely about the individual seeking success or validation through constant refining of that brand, right? But as a lot of us know or have experienced, that seeking never ends. It isolates. And a lot of the steps to success we're taught and keep us in isolation. Which is why this idea that we need to be constantly improving until we've reached full self-improvement, or constantly grinding until we've reached a measure of success that feels adequate, is anti-community. Because while self-improvement is great, obsession over it isn't. Why do you think people always say it's lonely at the top? Because in this pursuit, in this quest, we forget that the fulfillment and a lot of the answers to the questions we're asking are in community, collaboration, support, responsibility to one another. They're in the safe spaces we can create and rely on when we need to rediscover our voices, like I did. Safe spaces where we feel realized and our regularness is appreciated. There's no expectation to perform, where our personal successes, our creativity, our ideas are honored, celebrated with us. But individualism robs us of all that community has to offer, and no amount of good branding or success can replace that. So what's the solution? How do we keep our color in a world that's losing it? How do we welcome our creativity, honor our evolution, and foster community? The radical refusal. Refusal to internalize or attach our identities, to reduce them to tired labels or an oversimplification of self, or to take on external voices as our own because, well, they don't belong to us, as in a return to sender, to treat them like a boomerang instead of catching or carrying what they throw at us. And while radical refusal sounds a bit intense, it's not. It's small. It's like a muscle, small, consistent acts. And it's not just recognizing your voice, so that's the first step. It's believing it and trusting it to move your story. And to know if you're practicing radical refusal, you just need to ask yourself 2 questions as often as possible. 1, whose voice am I taking on right now? And 2, are the decisions I'm making today and every day moving my story forward, or just the brand? Thank you.